Hey guys, tonight we're heading back, way back, to the dusty, luminous heart of the ancient world. Welcome to Babylon. The sun's just beginning to rise over the horizon, casting long golden beams across the crumbling brick towers and palm-lined canals. The air is warm, already hinting at the heat to come, and filled with smells you probably won't recognize. Sweet fig paste, bitter myrrh smoke, and the ever-present tang of sun-baked bitumen. You blink a few times. No alarm clocks here. Just the sound of market hawkers slowly stirring and the creak of a cart being wheeled over stone. This is your morning now. You live in a city made almost entirely of sun-dried clay and rules. So many rules. Your roof is flat, your sandals are homemade, and if you're lucky, breakfast will be more than a single date and half a barley biscuit. If you're really lucky, your neighbor won't start arguing about goats before you've had a chance to wash your face. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's oddly fun seeing who's tuning in from a rainy hill in Wales or an air-conditioned apartment in Singapore. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your house is made of mud brick, the good kind, sun-baked and stacked with almost obsessive precision. The walls are thick, cool, and beige with just the faintest smell of clay dust. There's a courtyard in the center where a goose is noisily asserting its authority over a pot of standing water. This goose will feature heavily throughout your day. Don't test it. You grab your woven reed bag, toss in a small pouch of dried chickpeas, and head out. The door is a wooden plank held shut with a simple latch, and above it hangs a clay plaque marked with protective symbols, a handprint, a tiny triangle, and something that kind of resembles a fish but also might be a curse. Historians still argue whether these were house charms or early insurance policies. As you step into the street, the city greets you with its typical flair. Cracked bricks, a curious child holding an upside-down lizard, and the smell of someone's breakfast going very, very wrong over a fire. The lanes are narrow, designed more for foot traffic and stubborn goats than anything with wheels. And the goats? Oh, they're absolutely in charge. You pass a woman with a huge basket balanced on her head, grapes maybe, or figs, though some look suspiciously overripe. She nods at you, but doesn't slow down. No one does this early in the day. The city is still in that strange half-state between sleeping and working, when everything feels a little surreal and a little sacred. You hear the distant sound of temple bells, small bronze things, more like chimes, and a low chant humming through the walls of a nearby courtyard. That's your cue. The temples are opening. The priests are already halfway through the morning rites. You're not going there yet, but you note the scent of incense in the air. Frankincense, or maybe crushed cedar resin. Probably means there's a royal offering being made. And now your stomach grumbles, loudly, which reminds you of your first real task of the day, acquiring something edible. You round a corner and nearly trip over a small dog wearing a string of beads as a collar. It growls, but only a little. You toss it half a chickpea from your pouch, and it decides you're acceptable, for now. The baker's stall is just setting up, a few flat discs of dough already sizzling on hot stones. The smell is glorious, yeasty, warm, almost like popcorn. You hand over a tiny chipped token, a crude little cylinder seal that marks your household, and receive a palm-sized round of fresh bread. It's slightly burnt on one side, but you're not here to complain. Bread in hand, you find a nearby stone step and take a seat. The sun is just cresting the eastern wall of the city now, its light spilling across rooftops and hitting the upper arches of the temple towers. You can see the ziggurat in the distance, Babylon's not-so-humble brag. A staircase to the gods, or at least a really good place to feel important. Mainstream historical fact? That ziggurat probably inspired the Tower of Babel myth. It was real, it was tall, and no, it didn't actually reach heaven. It did, however, require a lot of maintenance. Bitumen melts in the heat, and we're talking Iraqi summer levels here. The top would have been so sticky, birds occasionally got trapped mid-peck. And here's your quirky tidbit of the morning. Babylonian engineers figured out how to build drains in their streets using baked clay tubes. That's right, ancient plumbing. So if you ever thought your toilet is a modern marvel, think again. A priest walks by just then, resplendent in dyed robes of indigo and white. He's barefoot and muttering what sounds like a shopping list, which is mildly hilarious when you realize he's also wearing a golden medallion shaped like a crescent moon. Even holy men need lentils. As you finish your bread, the city stirs around you. Sellers begin setting up their carts, copper trinkets, dyed wool, herbs hanging in thick bundles like sleepy green bats. A boy runs past with a basket of live pigeons, one of which looks deeply unimpressed. Someone shouts in the distance, something about a borrowed ox and a missing sandal. You'll hear more about that later. Babylon's gossip network runs faster than its water system. You rise, brushing the crumbs from your tunic, and start walking again. The heat is building, the city is stretching, and you, strangely enough, are starting to feel like a part of it. A few more streets, a few more strange smells, and a quick sidestep around a pile of, you hope that's clay, and you're ready to dive deeper into this ancient maze. The sun is officially up, the city is awake, and you haven't even made it to the temple yet.
You head uphill toward the great ziggurat, towering above the rest of Babylon, like a tiered wedding cake made of ancient ambition and a lot of dust. The road winds between stalls, homes, and the occasional mud-slick alley that you do not want to slip in. You pass under a painted lintel, blue with faded gold stars, marking the approach to the temple district. A woman selling lotus oil nods at you. Her teeth are stained with something reddish. Betel nut, maybe, or possibly pomegranate. Either way, you nod back like you've seen worse things before breakfast. A thin stream of water runs beside the path, diverted from the canal, clear and surprisingly cold to the touch. A pair of toddlers are poking it with sticks and arguing in tiny, emphatic babble about who gets the good frog. You don't intervene. These things sort themselves out, or end in tears, often both. As you draw closer, you can feel it, the weight of the temples, not just physically, though the stones are heavy and wide and carved with images of bulls, gods, and stylized palms. It's a psychic weight, too. You're standing where people bring their deepest fears and most awkward confessions, where trade deals are blessed and wars are launched with a whisper and a goat sacrifice. Today's mood? Surprisingly mellow. No flutes, no chanting, just a few sandal-clad priests sweeping the entry steps and gossiping about who burnt the last offering. One gestures dramatically and says something about too much cumin. The gods are picky. You pass under an archway and into a shaded courtyard where the air shifts, cooler, quieter, like stepping into the eye of a storm. At the far end, beyond carved pillars and a curtain of hanging reeds, you see the altar. It's smaller than you imagined, just a smooth slab of black stone, worn at the corners and dusted with powdered herbs. It smells like thyme, cedar, and that one spice you can never quite name, but always associate with divination and slightly overpriced incense. Mainstream historical fact: the temples weren't just religious centers. They were banks, schools, and record-keeping hubs. Need a loan? The priest scribe has a ledger. Want to sell your barley harvest? Bring a goat for collateral and a contract in clay. Need to curse your cousin's landlord? We've got a ritual for that. You wander to a wall where small offerings are placed, dried figs, broken beads, knotted thread, even a polished chicken bone that looks suspiciously well-loved. Someone's drawn a spiral in dust. Someone else's spiral crosses it. You get the sense no one's quite sure what these marks mean, but everyone agrees not to erase them. A priestess enters, young, wrapped in russet cloth with saffron embroidery. She carries a bowl of burning herbs and fans it gently, trailing sweet smoke behind her like a perfumed comet. She pauses to smile at an elderly man arranging a garland on a statue's neck. The statue is probably Marduk or Enlil. Honestly, the head's chipped and the nose is suspiciously beak-like. Could be a recycled eagle. Here's your quirky tidbit. Babylonian temples often included god beds, literal beds made for the deity to sleep in, complete with bedding, offerings, and sometimes even a priestess consort to interpret dreams on the god's behalf. That's right, ancient divine Airbnb. You keep moving, past a wall lined with clay tablets. Some are prayers, others are IOUs. One, hilariously, is just a doodle of a goat wearing a crown. Historians still argue whether this was satire, devotional art, or simply a bored apprentice with too much stylus and not enough supervision. The ziggurat looms in the background, its layers stacked like thought itself, wide at the base, focused at the peak. You climb a few steps, then pause. You're not actually allowed all the way up. Only priests and royals go that high. Rumor has it, the view from the top is divine. Also, very windy. Robes have flown off. There were complaints. Instead, you find a shady corner where an older woman is quietly reciting a blessing over a small dish of lentils. She sprinkles something over them, probably crushed dates or dried mint, and sets the bowl near a painted niche. Her fingers linger in the air afterward, tracing the outline of something unseen. When she catches you watching, she just shrugs. "For my sister," she says. Then adds, "She liked lentils." You nod. It seems reasonable. The air in the courtyard is rich now. Spice, ash, something faintly metallic. You could stay here longer, soaking it in. But the temple is its own world, eternal, patient, and oddly outside time. You remember that you still have things to do, someone to visit, possibly a sheep to bargain for. Life doesn't pause, even in holy places. You step back into the light. The city's rhythm hits you again. Chatter, hoofbeats, a flute somewhere off-key, and a street performer trying to juggle 3 stones and a gourd. He's not great, but he is enthusiastic. Down a side path, past the perfume sellers and a suspiciously enthusiastic dentist advertising painless extractions with a bone hook, you spot something unexpected. A small, shaded scriptorium. Clay shelves, low benches, and a bored-looking teenager rolling a fresh tablet in his hands. You duck in. He looks up. "Copywork or dictation?" he asks. You blink. "I was just looking." He shrugs, scratches something into the tablet, probably tourist. Mainstream historical fact. Babylonian scribes were elite. Years of training, hundreds of cuneiform symbols, and a frankly absurd number of spelling rules. Writing was power, and mostly limited to the upper class or those sponsored by temples. You wander the shelves. Recipes, prayers, contracts, omens. One tablet is a star chart, arcs and dots pressed into clay so tightly it looks like braille from the gods. Another lists types of beer, complete with commentary like "too frothy" and "smells like river frog." You pocket that wisdom for later. Here's another fringe tidbit. They had a specific symbol for donkey fart. No, really, used in insults, and possibly weather reports. Babylon was nothing if not practical. The teenager, now intrigued by your strange interest in donkey-based glyphs, offers to show you how to write your name. You try. The stylus feels clumsy, and the clay is weirdly resistant. You manage 3 symbols and a small accidental smiley face. He approves. Better than most. As you leave, the air feels different, thicker, like the city's been watching you, approving maybe, or just curious. You pass another shrine, this one shaped like a lion's head. Someone's left a fish. It's already attracting flies. The lion does not seem amused. You pause, take a breath. The sun is high now, casting sharp shadows. The streets are busier. Everyone's out, bargaining, shouting, laughing, living. You fall into step, just another figure in the rhythm. You're not just observing Babylon anymore. You are Babylon now.
The scent of baking barley bread hits you like a friendly slap to the face. You turn a corner, and there it is, a flatbread stall, tucked between a potter's workshop and a surprisingly noisy flock of geese, all hissing like tiny feathered demons. The baker,
elbow-deep in flour and cheerfully sweating into the dough, greets you with a nod. He's wearing a tunic the exact color of yesterday's stew and has ash smudged across his forehead like a very devout ghost. "Hot bread! No stones this time!" he calls out. You're not sure if that's a joke or a guarantee. You hand over a bronze coin that feels like it's been through 3 floods and a plague or 2. In return, you get a warm, charred disk of heaven. Crusty on the edges, soft in the middle, with hints of cumin and, oh yes, a single black olive hidden like a buried treasure. You wander while you eat. Around you the market hums. Not the chaos you'd expect, more of a communal hum, like bees who gossip while they work. Clay beads jingle. A child tugs on her mother's sleeve, pointing at a cage full of doves. Somewhere nearby, a harp plucks a melody that almost sounds like a lullaby, until it takes a sharp left turn into something that makes your left eyebrow twitch. Babylonian jazz? Mainstream historical fact, Babylon had specialized markets for everything: fish, dates, wool, even second-hand sandals. Vendors often shouted prices in sing-song, and bartering was more common than coins. If you had onions, someone had barley. If you had sheep dung, someone had a surprisingly eager buyer. You pass a woman selling dyed wool, her fingers stained teal and red. A basket of drop spindles sits beside her, each one carved with symbols, stars, waves, possibly one rude joke. She offers you a piece of string to examine. It's soft, strong, probably better than your last relationship. Nearby, 2 older men argue over the price of smoked fish. One insists his nephew caught it at dawn. The other replies that the fish smells like it died in last week's soup. You nod politely and move on. Disputes like these could go on until next harvest. Here's a fringe tidbit. The Babylonians used onions as both currency and medicine. In a pinch, you could pay your taxes and cure your cousin's foot rash with the same bulb. Economical and aromatic. You duck under a canopy of woven reeds into a quieter part of the market. This is where the charm makers and medicine peddlers whisper their pitches. A man with half a beard, just the left side, no explanation, offers you a vial of dream water, claims it cures headaches, nightmares, and unusual neighbors. You pretend to consider it, then quietly decline. You already have enough weird dreams without the help. Someone's burning myrrh. The smoke drifts lazily, curling around baskets of dried scorpions, fragments of copper, and bundles of herbs that smell like good decisions. You hear the soft clink of carved bones being cast into a bowl. Divination? Maybe? Or just someone playing a dice game with very dramatic flair. And then you spot her, a woman with silver rings stacked to her elbows and a smile like she knows something you don't, which, statistically, she probably does. She sells amulets, tiny carvings of bulls, fish, eyes, stars. One looks suspiciously like a turtle. Another looks exactly like your neighbor's cat. You point at it. She grins. She says, "For protection or revenge, depends how you wear it." You buy the cat. She wraps it in linen, dabs it with something that smells like mint and thunder, and hands it over with both hands. She says, "Keep it near your door or your dreams." Historians still argue whether these amulets were truly magical, symbolic, or simply early Etsy, but judging by her smirk, it doesn't really matter. With your new purchase tucked safely into your pouch, you move on. The market thins out here, replaced by quieter booths and more serious buyers. Scribes trade tablets. A man holds a live goose under one arm and haggles furiously for an axe head. A group of musicians sit cross-legged, tuning instruments that look like someone accidentally invented the banjo too early. You pause at a booth covered in reed mats. On them lie carefully labeled jars, dried figs, ground date pits, powdered lotus, fragments of cinnamon bark. A young boy fans the jars with a palm frond while his grandmother handles the sales. You buy a pinch of dried pomegranate flour. No reason, it just smells nice. You reach the edge of the market and step into a sunlit square. A public well gurgles gently, its rim surrounded by gossiping women, dusty children, and one suspiciously relaxed dog. You scoop a handful of water. It's cooler than you expect, clear as glass, and leaves behind a faint taste of copper and clay. A girl offers you a fig. You take it. It's overripe, soft, sticky, and sweeter than a bribe. You sit on the low wall beside the well and watch the world tilt forward. The sun leans west now. Shadows stretch like lazy cats. The breeze carries laughter and the faint jingle of coins in someone's pouch. A man sits nearby, whittling a flute out of date palm wood. He hums as he works, an ancient lullaby, maybe, or just whatever was stuck in his head. He doesn't look up, but he says, "New here?" You nod. "Just passing through." Everyone says that, until Babylon gets in your bones. He's not wrong. You tilt your head back. The sky is blue and enormous. Somewhere above a hawk circles. Maybe lunch. Maybe omens. You've learned not to ask. And just for a moment, everything feels stitched together. Market noise, breadcrumbs on your tunic, the amulet warming in your pocket. You're not a tourist anymore. You're woven into the pattern.
You wake up to the sound of drums. Not war drums, don't worry. You're not about to be drafted into the world's oldest and most chaotic militia. These are rhythm drums, celebration drums, low and steady, pulsing through the city like a heartbeat with somewhere to be. You stretch on your mat, woven reeds, surprisingly comfortable, unless you rolled directly onto one of the knots. Your back cracks in 4 places, and you feel a bit like a particularly underfilled scroll. But you're alive, which, in ancient Babylon, is already a win. The drums are coming from the processional way. So you pull on your sandals, one still damp from yesterday's puddle, of course, and head toward the sound, weaving through alleyways that smell like last night's lentil stew and distant incense. A cat watches you from a rooftop with judgment so intense it could curdle milk. As you reach the processional way, it becomes clear. Something is happening. Not just a festival, but the festival. Mainstream historical fact, every spring, Babylon celebrated the Akitu festival. New Year, rebirth, crops, gods, and parades rolled into one grand event that could last up to 12 days. That's right, 12 days. Somewhere in there, everyone's dignity and sandals gave out. The avenue is packed with people, some in ceremonial robes, others wearing whatever survived the last laundry day. Musicians line the walls with drums, flutes, and something that sounds suspiciously like a goat trying to whistle. And then come the statues, massive wooden forms gilded and clothed, pulled on carts and surrounded by priests with torches. At the front of it all is Marduk, the supreme deity of Babylon, looking like he could definitely smite your entire bloodline if your offering's off by a fig or two. You watch as the statue procession winds through the city. Priests chant in Old Babylonian, half singing, half roaring, the kind of language you feel more than understand. Children throw petals, someone hands you a palm frond. You wave it once and immediately hit a merchant in the face. He glares and shrugs. Festival vibes. The statue of Marduk is taken to the Esagila temple, where sacred rituals take place. You're not allowed in there, unless you've got the proper robes, the right birth certificate, and maybe a few favors owed to the high priest. But you linger outside with everyone else, where gossip is just as sacred. Fringe tidbit. During the Akitu festival, the king himself was ritually humiliated. Stripped of regalia, he was slapped by a priest and made to confess his unworthiness. If the priest cried, yes, actual tears, it was taken as a sign that Marduk forgave the king. If he didn't cry, well, let's just say Babylon occasionally needed a new king in April. You look around.
People are cheering, laughing, eating things on skewers that defy easy identification. Somewhere, a man in a lion mask is doing an aggressive dance with a woman dressed as a wheat stalk. Interpret as you will. You follow the crowd to a side plaza where a street play is being performed. Actors in painted masks reenact the creation myth, Marduk slaying the chaos dragon Tiamat, fashioning the world from her defeated body. You squint. One of the actors is definitely using a laundry basket as a shield. A+ for effort. Nearby, food vendors do brisk business. You buy something wrapped in fig leaves and stuffed with rice, lentils, and more herbs than a Mediterranean cookbook. It's warm, fragrant, and falls apart gloriously in your hands. You immediately want 6 more. Children run past with clay noisemakers. One stops to stare at your sandals, specifically the mud-crusted one, and asks you if you're a traveler or just very bad at walking. You tell him it's festival style. He nods solemnly, then throws a fig pit at a wall and disappears. As the sun climbs, the city begins to shimmer. Not metaphorically, everything's actually shimmering. Gold foil, bronze jewelry, ceremonial oil, and enough sweat to fill a small reservoir. You duck into a colonnade where a group of elders are seated, fanning themselves with bits of papyrus and muttering about how the parades used to mean something. Historians still argue whether these public displays of devotion were genuinely spiritual or just savvy politics. After all, nothing says, "My God is better than yours," like a 20-foot statue wearing gold eyeliner and being pulled by 12 oxen. You sit for a moment and sip from your water pouch. It's tepid, slightly cloudy, but does the job. Beside you, someone plays a sistrum, an instrument that's basically a rattle with delusions of grandeur. The sound is oddly soothing, like a cat's purr filtered through a wind chime. Eventually, the crowd begins to move again. People are heading toward the ziggurat, the grand staircase to the sky, with its gleaming tiles and impossible angles. You follow at a respectful pace, trying not to trip on your robe or the tiny dog that seems to have adopted your ankle. As you approach the base of the ziggurat, a hush falls. A priest stands at the first step, holding a bowl of water. One by one, people come forward, dip their fingers in, and touch it to their foreheads. A symbolic cleansing. You do the same. The stairs are steep, sunlit, and lined with mosaics that glint like trapped rainbows. You climb slowly. Each step feels like a shift in the air, as if the sky's getting closer, ready to lean down and whisper something ancient in your ear. At the top, a breeze, finally. You step onto the flat summit platform, where priests move like clockwork between altars, scrolls, and hanging incense. A view like this could make a poet out of a bricklayer. You can see the entire city, its squares, its towers, its ants that are actually people. A woman next to you is singing softly. A hymn, maybe? Or a lullaby disguised as a prayer. You don't understand the words, but the feeling wraps around you like a warm shawl. You stand there for a while, not waiting, just being. The city breathes below. Bells ring in the distance. Somewhere, someone drops a basket and swears creatively. Life continues, and so do you.
You make your way back down the ziggurat, carefully navigating the narrow stone steps with the grace of someone who absolutely does not want to fall and become a cautionary tale about hubris and gravity. The breeze follows you, soft and citrus-tinged, like someone somewhere is zesting an orange for a god. By the time your sandals meet the dusty street again, the festival crowds have started to thin, the energy shifting from ritual to relaxation. You follow the flow of people toward the outer district, where the celebrations give way to the comforts of the everyday. Here, the city loosens its belt. You pass a stall selling clay figurines, tiny bulls, little goddesses, exaggerated musicians. You're particularly drawn to one shaped like a sleeping lion, except the artist gave it comically droopy eyelids and an oversized yawn. You don't buy it, but you mentally name it Gerald. Mainstream historical fact: in daily Babylonian life, markets were more than just places to buy fish or barley. They were gossip hubs, marriage negotiators, religious info centers, and impromptu comedy clubs. Imagine your local supermarket but with a harpist and a priest squabbling over lentils. You linger near a small food stand where an elderly couple sells warm rounds of flatbread topped with soft cheese and a drizzle of date syrup. It's sweet, salty, and sticky enough to merit its own scroll. You thank them in broken Akkadian, and they respond in perfect, unimpressed silence. The residential district is a patchwork of clay brick homes, low and sun-baked. You peek into one courtyard where laundry sways from ropes and two children are chasing each other with feathered sticks. A sleepy goat watches from the shade like he's above it all. He probably is. Fringe tidbit: Babylonian houses often featured private altars to household gods called lamassu. These weren't your typical scary guardian spirits. They looked like winged bulls with human faces and often had surprisingly fashionable beards. It was sort of like praying to a stern uncle with wings and great hair. You linger near a small food stand where an elderly couple sells warm rounds of flatbread topped with soft cheese and a drizzle of date syrup. It's sweet, salty, and sticky enough to merit its own scroll. You thank them in broken Akkadian, and they respond in perfect, unimpressed silence. The residential district is a patchwork of clay brick homes, low and sun-baked. You peek into one courtyard where laundry sways from ropes and two children are chasing each other with feathered sticks. A sleepy goat watches from the shade like he's above it all. He probably is. Fringe tidbit: Babylonian houses often featured private altars to household gods called lamassu. These weren't your typical scary guardian spirits. They looked like winged bulls with human faces and often had surprisingly fashionable beards. It was sort of like praying to a stern uncle with wings and great hair. The alleys here twist and tangle like someone tried to build a maze and gave up halfway. You stumble upon a public fountain, really more of a trickling stone trough, where locals are rinsing herbs, refilling jugs, and sharing what could either be jokes or veiled threats. You're not fluent enough to tell. Someone points you toward a bathhouse. Now don't picture marble columns and lavender oils. That's more Roman. Babylonian bathhouses were humble but effective. Rooms with steaming pits, a few hot stones, and attendants who could scrub the existential dread right out of your pores. You pay a small fee in bronze and step inside. The heat hits you like a friendly ghost with a grudge. Warmth wraps around your limbs, thick and heavy, dragging the festival dust from your skin. You sit on a stone bench and exhale deeply. A nearby bather chuckles and mutters something about newcomers always sighing. Historians still argue whether communal bathhouses served more as hygiene centers or social clubs. Most likely they were both. Here, people shared rumors, recited poems, gave backhanded compliments, and probably invented the first passive-aggressive water splash. An attendant named Nabu gently but firmly exfoliates your arm with what appears to be a loofah made of tree bark and personal judgment. When he's done, he pats your shoulder like a coach and moves on. You emerge cleaner, lighter, and vaguely lemon-scented, despite there being no lemons within a 100-mile radius. Outside, the sun has dipped lower. The shadows stretch long, turning corners into caverns and streets into veins of coppery light. You walk past the scribal school, just a dusty courtyard filled with wooden benches and clay tablets. A young boy chants out cuneiform signs, while his teacher nods with the slow approval of someone who's taught 12 generations of equally distracted children. You pause to watch. The boy is writing something about grain stores and delivery counts, but you can see the gleam in his eye. He's definitely planning to doodle a dragon in the margin as soon as no one's looking. Good. You follow the sound of music. It's coming from a rooftop where a family has gathered for evening rest. Someone strums a lyre. A woman sings, soft, rhythmic, half lullaby, half lull. The words are old, older than the walls themselves. Something about stars watching crops and dreams made of barley. They wave you up. You hesitate. But then again, how often are you invited to a rooftop concert in ancient Babylon? You climb the mud brick stairs and settle beside them. A platter of dates and nuts is passed around. Someone hands you a ceramic cup of watered wine. Light, little sour, but refreshing. The kind of drink that makes conversation easier without making the floor unpredictable. The rooftop view is simple but perfect. You see the last shimmer of festival lights, the temple towers outlined against a salmon-pink sky, and the lazy loops of birds gliding overhead like they're sketching in the air. The family speaks in slow Akkadian, and you understand pieces: harvest, dream, thread, God. You nod, not to fake understanding, but to show that the moment itself is enough. Fringe fact: ancient Babylonians believed dreams were messages from the gods. Professional dream interpreters, called baru, could analyze a single night's vision and suggest everything from changing your job to sacrificing a goat. Basically therapists with more incense. The woman beside you touches your sleeve and murmurs, "Marduk sees." It's not a warning, more like a reminder, soft and sure, like when someone tells you your shoelace is untied with genuine kindness. The sky purples. Stars bloom. A breeze pulls gently across the rooftops, full of warmth and dusk and distant baking bread. The lyre plays on. You think of Marduk, of the ziggurat, of the processional way, but mostly you think of this: flatbread and music, gentle laughter, the shared silence of people who know life is a thread you have to hold carefully, lest it tangle beyond repair. You're not from here, not really, but tonight, you belong.
The lyre's final notes fade into the evening air like the last ripples on a calm river. No applause, just a collective exhale, as if everyone agrees the moment has earned its stillness. Someone yawns. Someone else stretches. The rooftop begins to settle into quiet murmurs and drifting thoughts. You murmur your thanks in clumsy Akkadian, bow slightly, and descend the stairs. The ground feels cooler now, like the city itself has unclenched its jaw. Babylon, in the evening, is no longer the bustling center of empire. It's a place of soft footsteps and slow recollections. You walk aimlessly for a while, letting your feet make decisions your brain is too relaxed to question. The streets are quieter now, interrupted only by the distant bray of a donkey or the clink of a pot being put away for the night. You turn a corner and find yourself in what looks like an artisan's district. There's a pottery studio with half-finished amphorae lining the shelves. Their curved bellies catch the lantern light, throwing looping shadows that look like dancing snakes. You resist the urge to tap one to see if it sings. Mainstream historical fact: Babylonian artisans were highly respected, especially those who worked with clay. Clay was, after all, the backbone of everything: writing, architecture, trade, and even divine offerings. A well-formed bowl could be more valuable than a bronze tool. Through a half-open doorway, you glimpse a weaver working by oil lamp. She's older, her hands a blur of callus and rhythm. A cat sleeps near her feet, one ear twitching at every creak. The threads she uses are dyed in soft purples and earthy reds. You watch her shuttle move, left, right, beat. Left, right, beat. It's hypnotic. Fringe tidbit: Some Babylonian weavers included messages or blessings woven directly into the cloth using subtle pattern shifts. Not exactly legible unless you knew what to look for, but the gods supposedly noticed. Divine reading comprehension was assumed to be excellent. You nod to her. She doesn't stop, but she nods back. In that one motion, you feel completely accepted and utterly dismissed, which seems fair. Down the alley, a door creaks open. A child peeks out, then steps into the street carrying a bowl of lentils and grain. She places it carefully near a small altar built into the wall, a square of stone with a shallow niche where a faded figurine sits. The child bows, whispers something into the still air, and slips back inside. You approach the altar. The figurine is humble, carved from clay, smoothed by time. Maybe it's a fertility goddess. Maybe it's a spirit of the street. Or maybe, as some historians suggest, it's a household deity, adopted from an older culture Babylon absorbed. There's a dent in her side, where people have touched her for luck. Historians still argue whether Babylon's pantheon was genuinely worshipped by all, or if in practice many citizens paid tribute to lesser-known spirits, local guardians and personal gods that weren't big enough to make the temple lists, but plenty important at the dinner table. You leave a small offering too, just a flower you picked without thinking, pressed slightly in your palm. It seems enough. You don't know the proper prayer, but you offer the silence like one. A cat slinks past you again, maybe the same one from the weaver's home, maybe a cousin. Cats here carry themselves like librarians, quiet, observant, absolutely judging you. You keep walking and find yourself near the Euphrates River. It glistens in the dark, wide and patient, like a ribbon of obsidian pulled tight through the land. Lanterns from distant boats float across the water, their reflections trembling in the current. The air is thick with the scent of reeds and warm mud. You sit at the river's edge, feet dangling above the slow-moving surface. Something croaks nearby, a frog or a spirit, hard to say. Fringe fact: the Babylonians believed that the river was not just a source of life and irrigation, but also a channel of divine energy. It connected the heavens and the underworld in a constant loop. Some rituals required you to whisper your wishes into the current and let them drift into divine ears. You try it. You lean forward, whisper a quiet wish, nothing dramatic, just a hope for peace, for something beautiful to last. The river doesn't respond, but it also doesn't laugh, which is a win. Above you, the stars have fully emerged. Babylonian astronomers tracked these constellations obsessively, often carving their predictions into clay tablets. They didn't just name stars, they gave them jobs. The constellations weren't just markers of time, but personalities, mythological messengers, and divine clocks. One twinkles particularly brightly above you. It's probably known to modern astronomers as something Latin and aggressive, like Scorpius, but the Babylonians called it Gur-Tab, the scorpion, and believed it marked danger and change. You trace it with your finger, feeling both tiny and infinite at the same time. You hear soft footsteps behind you, just one person, a priest maybe, or a traveler like yourself. You don't turn. You just sit together in silence, joined not by conversation, but by the shared reverence for water and stars. Eventually, they leave, and you're alone again. Except you're not. The city hums behind you, low and constant. Somewhere, a flute plays a melody so slow it could be mistaken for a breeze. Somewhere else, A baby cries and is quickly hushed. A door creaks. A fire hisses. A dog barks once, and then, seemingly embarrassed, stops. And somewhere, unseen but absolutely present, the gods linger. They don't shout. They don't strike lightning. They don't hover above you in glowing chariots. They're in the bread, the weaving, the river, the wish. You lie back on the soft embankment, the reeds whispering nearby. The stars above blur just a little from your half-closed eyes. For a moment, you think you hear someone say your name in the language of dreams. But maybe it's just the river, speaking in loops.
When you wake, or maybe just shift into a lighter sleep, the sky has shifted again. It's deep indigo now, almost black, with stars punching clean holes through the dark like a scroll poked by a curious scribe. The Euphrates still murmurs beside you, endlessly patient, endlessly telling its own story. You sit up slowly, brushing stray reeds from your tunic. Your spine protests slightly. You're not entirely sure how long you were dozing, but time here feels more circular than linear anyway. Just one more loop in a day braided like a river. The streets are nearly deserted now. Babylon doesn't quite sleep. Too many stars to track, too many night shift prayers to whisper, but it sighs deeply, letting most of its weight rest. You walk again, letting instinct pull you through a narrow corridor lined with tall mud-brick buildings. Their upper windows are shuttered. A faint scent of roasted barley still clings to the air, as if supper doesn't want to be forgotten just yet. You turn a corner and stumble into something unexpected. A courtyard, small, quiet, and completely flooded with the silvery glow of moonlight. In the center stands a ziggurat-shaped incense burner, short, squat, carved from fired clay and etched with ancient spirals. The last of its smoke trails upward in a lazy, twisting dance. You approach slowly. There's no one here, or rather, no one visible. Mainstream historical fact. Babylonian ziggurats weren't just temples, they were cosmic elevators. Each tier symbolized a level of the universe, from the underworld to the domain of the gods. Some priests even slept at the top to receive divine messages in dreams. You circle the burner once, noticing small offerings around its base: a cracked shell, a folded scrap of dyed linen, 3 lentils arranged in a triangle. Nothing grand, nothing fancy, but it feels sacred nonetheless. Fringe tidbit. Some scholars think Babylon had a whole unofficial network of dream courtyards like this, spaces not part of the main temples where ordinary people could try to commune with the divine on their own terms, prayer but unplugged. You sit cross-legged beside the burner. You don't plan to pray exactly, you just want to listen. The stone beneath you is cool. The air hums gently. You close your eyes. What you hear first is nothing. Then, faintly, the city begins to sing. Not in melody, but in layers. A distant splash from the river. The shuffle of a night guard's sandals. A bird ruffling its feathers high on a lintel. The creak of a wooden door that never quite latches. And beneath it all, like a slow drumbeat, your own breath. This is a city so alive it hums in its sleep. Historians still argue whether Babylon's nighttime rituals were reserved only for priests or if the entire city, in its own subtle way, joined in. Some tablets suggest shared festivals, moonlit processions, and even neighborhood chants, rituals performed by starlight alone. You open your eyes again. The moon is higher now, slicing the sky like a well-honed sickle.
You feel as if you've wandered into a dream that someone else began but forgot to finish. Rising, you take one last look at the little altar before moving on. The streets are darker now, shadowed and soft. You pass a bakery with its shutters cracked, letting out a ghost of yeasty warmth. A dog lies sprawled across the stoop, belly up, legs twitching in some canine drama you'll never understand. You stop when you see it. A wall, almost plain except for a sprawling mural painted across its surface in faded ochres and rust reds. The lines are thin and looping, like vines or veins, coiling into scenes. It tells a story. No words, just images. A serpent rising from water, a woman weaving, a lion with wings, a tower of bricks, a star falling, a man holding two fish, a tree with a face, a hand touching fire. It's like a bedtime story you've half forgotten and half dreamed. Mainstream historical fact: Babylonian homes often featured apotropaic murals, paintings meant to ward off evil, tell stories, or remind residents of their place in the cosmos. Some included coded astrological charts or mythic warnings in symbolic form. You trail your fingers gently over the dried plaster, feeling the texture of time. Fringe tidbit: one half-preserved mural in a private home included a giant blue-painted eye believed to watch the house while its occupants slept. Not creepy at all, of course, not in the least. You smile. The mural seems to approve. It's late or early. Either way, the air is beginning to shift again. A faint breeze rises, carrying with it the scent of cumin and river mist and something unplaceably ancient, like books that have never been written. You make your way toward your lodging, a small guest house tucked behind a grocer's stall with an oil lamp flickering just inside. The keeper is asleep on a bench, snoring softly, one sandal dangling from his toes. Your cot waits inside, simple, rough-woven linen and a pillow made of something definitely not down. But it looks like the most welcoming thing you've ever seen. You stretch, once, twice, then settle in. The last thing you hear before sleep catches you by the collar is the whisper of a breeze through the shutters and the faintest sound of something weaving, far away, but unmistakable. Left, right, beat.
You wake to the slow blink of morning light, drowsy, gold-tinged, the kind that barely commits to rising. It creeps through the shutters in soft strips, dust motes swirling in its path like lazy fireflies. Somewhere outside, a rooster is enthusiastically overestimating its importance. You stretch with a sound that may or may not be a groan. Your cot creaks in protest. The pillow has collapsed into something resembling a tired pastry, but you've had worse. You sit up, rub your eyes, and watch as the city gradually stirs awake. Babylon in the early morning is unhurried. It doesn't lurch out of bed. It reclines. It lets the sun do the heavy lifting. You shuffle toward the guesthouse courtyard, yawning so wide your jaw clicks. The keeper offers a bowl of barley gruel without making eye contact. His sandal is finally back on, though now on the wrong foot. You sip slowly. The gruel is there. Not good, not bad, just a warm beige reassurance that you're still alive. Mainstream historical fact: breakfast in ancient Mesopotamia was typically simple. Barley mash, dates, goat cheese if you were lucky, and lots of watered-down beer. Yes, beer for breakfast. No, they weren't trying to party. It was safer than most water. Out in the street, the city's tempo increases notch by notch. Market stalls bloom like flowers opening. Merchants haul crates of dried fish and cracked pomegranates. A child chases a goat with the resigned fury of someone who's done this before. A scribe is already unrolling a clay tablet under a shaded archway, muttering something that might be a curse or just very early math. You follow your feet again, no map, just instinct, and find yourself weaving through an alley behind a line of laundresses scrubbing cloth in basins. They chat as they work, laughter rising like bubbles from the soapy water. You catch bits of conversation, gossip about a priest's affair with a potter, complaints about the price of salt, and one unexpectedly philosophical remark about ducks. Fringe tidbit. Babylonian laundresses had their own patron spirit, thought to live in the steam rising from wash basins. Offerings included olive oil and little clay ducks. You suppose the gods of laundry must be both powerful and deeply patient. You nod politely as you pass. One of the women gives you a knowing smirk, like she's seen your type before, half tourist, half dream. You continue through a side street where a vendor is loudly hawking reed sandals. You decline, gently, though your current ones are practically paper. A scribbled sign says, "Best for heat, floods, and awkward visits to in-laws." Tempting. You turn a corner and pause. Before you stands a schoolhouse. Small, square, made of pale mud brick, and absolutely buzzing with noise. Inside, rows of children sit cross-legged on mats, each with a clay tablet and stylus in hand. A teacher at the front is reciting something in a sing-song chant, which the students repeat, slightly off-beat and entirely too loud for this hour. Mainstream historical fact: Babylonian education centered on the scribal arts. Boys from wealthy families learned cuneiform writing, accounting, law, and religious texts. Girls mostly didn't. Sorry. You duck your head in quietly and watch as one boy tries very hard not to cry over a misshapen symbol. The teacher gives him a look that is somehow both bored and eternal. Historians still argue whether Babylonian schools were places of genuine learning or mostly rote memorization and social stratification. Some tablets show creative exercises. Others suggest long lists of lines like, "I will not argue with the scribe again." One student near the back glances up at you, then back to his tablet. He carves a lazy spiral in the clay. Nothing assigned, just art. You smile. Maybe Arachne would have liked this one. You slip out before the teacher notices you're not enrolled. As the morning unfolds, the city sharpens. Smells intensify. Sweat, cumin, roasting onions, and a background tang of clay dust. People move with purpose now. Deals are being struck, bribes discreetly offered, flirts exchanged with the speed of sparrow wings. You pass a shrine built directly into a wall, a narrow niche barely larger than your shoulders. Inside, a carved hand holds a bundle of styluses like a bouquet. It's an offering to Nabu, god of writing. Someone's etched a prayer into the plaster below. "May my hand not cramp before the accounting ends." Relatable. Fringe tidbit. Some scribes chewed bits of licorice root while working, believing it helped with memory. It also made their breath nicer, which may have helped them survive close-quarters lectures. You take a turn toward the canals now, where the river has split into smaller, calmer tributaries. The banks are lined with small gardens, eggplants, leeks, sesame bushes, and clusters of date palms. Farmers squat on low stools, tying reeds or checking soil. A girl with a clay jar on her head walks past you like it's nothing, posture so straight it could slice diamonds. You sit by the water's edge and trail your fingers through the current. It's warm, soft, like tea that forgot to steep. Historians still argue whether these smaller irrigation canals were centrally managed or maintained by local collectives. Records suggest a mix, some government control, some neighborly squabbles, some accidental floods blamed on unlucky goats. You lean back on your hands and exhale. It's mid-morning now, and the city is fully awake. But you are not rushing. You've walked through temples and alleyways, murals and dream courtyards, classrooms and canals, and yet the thread runs smooth, unbroken. Arachne would understand. She wouldn't need the pattern explained. She'd feel it in the palm of her hand. Twist, pull, wind, thread by thread.
You rise slowly from the canal's edge, brushing your palms on your tunic, which is now slightly damp and smells faintly of river and sun-baked dust. The girl with the clay jar is already gone, vanished into the mosaic of the city like a single stitch in an elaborate tapestry. Your feet find the main road again, the familiar rhythm of sandals on packed earth, the way your shadow leans slightly behind you now, stretched thin and golden. It's nearly midday, and the Babylonian sun is flexing its muscles. The scent in the air shifts, more food now, something sizzling, something sweet, something suspiciously burnt. You follow your nose through a narrow lane where traders with sweating brows cook street fare on clay griddles. There's a man turning chickpea patties with a shard of bronze, humming under his breath. Another is fanning a small brazier over skewered onions and sour plums. You nod politely, resisting the temptation to try everything. Your stomach, meanwhile, registers a formal complaint. Mainstream historical fact: Babylonian cuisine leaned heavily on grains, legumes, onions, garlic, and date syrup. They spiced their stews with cumin, coriander, and mustard seed. Elite kitchens had access to rare delicacies, but most food was practical, hearty, and surprisingly flavorful. You finally settle on a stuffed flatbread, warm, fragrant, filled with lentils and something green that might be parsley or might be a cousin of moss. It's delicious. You eat it sitting on a low step, watching the street swirl around you in loops of color and clamor. Nearby, two elderly men argue over a fish. One insists it's a sign from Ishtar. The other says it smells like poor storage. Fringe tidbit: Babylonians believed dreams involving fish foretold arguments or wealth, depending on the type of fish, of course. Carp meant confusion. Eel, unexpected guests. You wonder briefly what a fish sandwich might predict. You stand, licking date syrup from your fingers, and wander toward one of the larger canals again. This one is busier. Flat-bottomed boats move lazily along the water, pushed by long poles. A family floats by on a skiff piled high with melons, their dog barking at nothing in particular. You wave. The dog barks back. The rest of the family does not. You walk alongside the canal, pausing at a shaded bend where a group of young girls sit weaving reed mats. Their hands move so fast you think they might be enchanted. The mats will likely become baskets or boat covers, or maybe even ceremonial floor coverings. One girl looks up and offers you a half smile. Her fingers never stop moving. You remember Arachne again, not just as a weaver of beauty, but of rebellion. Her threads weren't just thread. They were messages. Historians still argue whether everyday inscriptions like these were meant for future generations or simply the practical act of documentation, but intent lingers in strange places. Even clay remembers. You close your eyes for a moment and lean your head back against the stone. The wind rustles the palms, brushing over your face like silk thread pulled through linen. The spider trinket is warm in your hand now. You wonder if Arachne is watching, or maybe weaving.
The stone marker cools slowly beneath your back as the afternoon edges toward evening.
Babylon's sun, ever theatrical, begins its descent in full performance mode, draping the rooftops and canals in gold so rich it might as well be hammered into place. You stand, the clay spider tucked safely in your pouch, and resume walking, though the pace has softened. The city is shifting again, entering its twilight rhythm. Not sleepy, exactly, just more reflective, like it's pausing between breaths. You find yourself drifting toward the residential quarter. Low, mud-brick homes, some 2 stories tall, clustered around shaded courtyards. Families gather in doorways. A few boys race past you, barefoot and shouting, while a woman yells after them, flour dust streaking her arms like war paint. Mainstream historical fact: Babylonian homes were often built around a central courtyard where daily life played out in full view: cooking, washing, child wrangling, and yes, the occasional ritual or family drama. Privacy wasn't much of a concept. Community was the architecture. You peer through one open doorway. Inside, a man is singing while grinding barley with a stone quern. The sound is low and lulling, as if he's half serenading the grain. In the corner, an elderly woman threads a needle and gestures to someone off-screen, probably the resident cat. Fringe tidbit: Babylonian cats were not merely tolerated, they were adored, protected, and sometimes even named in legal documents. One known example: a pet named Ningula's Gift, which may or may not be the ancient equivalent of naming your kitten Princess Mittens. You continue on, steps lighter now, meandering through alleys that curve like question marks. Overhead, laundry flaps between rooftops, tunics, linens, perhaps a loincloth waving indignantly in the breeze. You duck under a line of drying herbs and emerge into a small square. Here, an elderly man sits with a pair of sandals in his lap, carefully replacing the worn straps with twisted flax. His fingers work slowly, lovingly, as if the sandals are old friends being gently mended before one last journey. You stop and nod. He nods back. Nothing else needs saying. You sit beside the square's fountain, just a stone basin, really, filled with clear water and a few wayward flower petals. Children dip their hands in and flick each other. A girl offers you a reed bracelet. You take it. The fit is perfect. You think about threads again, about how every scene today has involved some form of weaving: cloth, rope, stories, lives. Babylon isn't just a city of bricks and gods. It's a city of stitches. Historians still argue whether Babylon's famed grandeur was exaggerated by later empires or faithfully recorded in texts like Herodotus's, who claimed the city was large enough for chariot races along the walls. But regardless of size, the intimacy of these daily rituals, these quiet labors, is undeniable. The sky darkens just slightly more. You rise and follow the edge of the square, finding a quiet path that leads behind the houses. Here, the noise fades to a gentle hum: frogs croaking by a canal, the rhythmic clatter of a loom in a distant home, the occasional burst of laughter that carries like a wind-blown seed. You come across a modest shrine tucked beneath an overhang of flowering vines. It's barely larger than a wardrobe, just enough space for a small clay idol and a bowl of dates. Someone has laid down a scrap of linen embroidered with stars. There's no label, no plaque, no temple guards, just reverence. You step forward, unsure why, and place your little spider figurine beside the dates. For Arachne, or whoever she's become, or always was. The light from a nearby oil lamp flickers across the idol's face, briefly giving it the illusion of movement. You're not spooked, just quieted, settled. You leave the shrine behind and walk along the outer edge of the neighborhood, where gardens snake between houses, small patches of onions, garlic, beans, melons. A woman stoops to water her cucumber vines with a jug. A goat watches solemnly, clearly invested in cucumber futures. You spot a vine curling around a crumbling wall, its tendrils spiraling in perfect mathematical arcs. It's the kind of thing Arachne might have admired, natural geometry that defies arrogance. You touch it gently, then move on. Eventually, your feet carry you to the edge of the river once more. The sun is lower now, a lazy amber coin sinking toward the horizon. Fishermen begin to gather their nets. A girl squats by the bank, humming as she sets paper-thin reed boats into the water, each with a tiny pedal as a sail. You kneel beside her. She says nothing. Neither do you. You watch as the tiny pedal boats drift away, carried by the same current that once dragged barges, dreams, scrawls, and possibly a few ill-advised house pets. Fringe tidbit. Some Babylonian children were taught divination games involving floating objects. The way something drifted or sank could predict weather, fortunes, or romantic prospects. You silently wish one of the little pedal boats a favorable love life. The river glows now, sunset caught in its surface like a memory refusing to blur. You imagine Arachne as part of this city, woven in, not just in myth, but in water, fabric, thought. You walk slowly back toward the heart of town. Lamps have been lit, casting soft halos on walls. Someone sings a lullaby from an upper floor. Someone else grumbles about a missing chicken. A group of girls sits in a doorway, braiding each other's hair, humming softly in sync with their movements. One looks up and says, "You look like you've been walking for 100 years." You shrug. "Then you must have stories," she says. "Maybe you do." You keep walking. The girl's humming fades behind you. As you turn the corner, you see a loom set up in a courtyard. No weaver in sight. The threads are strung, the shuttle paused mid-motion, as if someone just stepped away. You imagine her, whoever she is, returning in a moment, adjusting the tension, picking up where she left off, weaving something new, something old, something just for herself.
The stars have fully emerged now, glimmering like pinpricks through silk across the Babylonian night. The city, though still awake in pockets, moves slower, more careful with its sounds, more generous with its silences. You walk aimlessly for a while, letting the cool air settle into your tunic, your hair. It smells faintly of baked earth, river reeds, and something warm and smoky, like cumin scattered over hot embers. Eventually, you find yourself on a narrow street hemmed in by high walls. It's quiet here, but not abandoned. Somewhere above you, wind chimes made of polished shells whisper a lullaby only the breeze can interpret. Mainstream historical fact. The Babylonians aligned their city with the stars, both spiritually and literally. Their streets and temples often mirrored constellations, particularly the path of the sun and planets along the ecliptic. To walk through Babylon at night, especially in the quieter quarters, is to move through a cosmic blueprint. You pause at a low arched doorway. A man steps out balancing a platter covered with cloth. He nods to you, gestures toward the rooftop stairs, and disappears again. You take the hint. Climbing carefully, you emerge onto a flat rooftop. These spaces serve as night kitchens, bedrooms, gossip salons, and occasionally low-stakes stargazing decks.
Tonight, it's just a girl and her grandmother, seated cross-legged on mats, sharing figs and talking softly. They glance at you without alarm. The girl offers you a fig. You accept. It tastes like dusk, sweet, slow, a little sticky. Fringe tidbit. Figs were considered sacred in Mesopotamia. There's a tablet from Sumer listing a dream where the gods give a fig tree the ability to talk. Its first sentence, allegedly, was a complaint about birds pecking it. The girl's grandmother points upward where the constellations wheel quietly above you. She traces them with a fig stem like a stylus on parchment. "That one," she says, "that's the weaver." You squint. It could just as easily be a fish, or a comb, or a lopsided cartwheel. But you nod. "She ties the sky together," the grandmother continues, "so the stars don't fall." The girl grins. "Mama says if you see a falling star, it means she sneezed." You laugh softly, and it echoes into the night with a gentleness that surprises you. Historians still argue whether ancient constellations were purely astronomical or carried embedded mythologies passed through oral storytelling. Some think each star cluster had a guardian tale. Others argue that the constellations were mnemonic devices, celestial filing cabinets for seasonal knowledge. You lie back on the rooftop mat, the fig stem still in your hand. The sky overhead blooms darker, deeper. Somewhere nearby, a stringed instrument begins to pluck slow, cautious notes, like someone testing the quiet rather than disturbing it. It reminds you of loom strings, of threads being tightened, or maybe of the feeling before a story starts. A wind stirs. You pull your cloak closer. The grandmother hums something wordless. The girl hums back in harmony. They lean against each other like stacked pillows and slowly, silently begin threading beads onto a length of thread. Red ones, blue, a single golden one in the middle. It's not a ceremony. It's not even art. It's just something to do while waiting for sleep. You think of Arachne again, not as a punishment, not as a monster, as a thread worker, still weaving, still listening. You remember the loom left in the courtyard, half finished, lit by lamplight and moonlight in equal parts. There's something poetic about that. You wonder how many tapestries Babylon has left unfinished, how many tales spun just enough to snag a heart, then left to unravel. You stretch your legs. The fig stem drops beside you. The stars blink slowly, unhurried. You rise. With a nod to the rooftop duo, you descend and make your way back into the sleeping city. You pass doorways half closed. Inside, shadows of lovers and insomniacs move like silhouettes behind linen curtains. A cat darts across your path. You pause long enough to watch it leap gracefully into a palm tree. You keep walking. In a small alley, you stumble upon a mural. Faded, fragmented. A woman with arms raised above her head, holding a sun disk in one hand and a spool of thread in the other. You lean in. It's not labeled, not famous, but you know her. It's Arachne, or her shadow, or her echo. The gods have their statues, but the weavers, they etch their legacy on fabric and walls, on the skins of cities, on the backs of myths. You press your hand lightly against the mural, as if greeting an old friend. The wall is warm, like it remembers. A soft breeze pushes through the alley. It lifts your hair, carries dust, jasmine, the laughter of someone just out of sight. And somewhere high above, a thread is being pulled through stars. You walk again. Babylon isn't finished with you yet.
The mural fades behind you as the alley opens into a small courtyard, walled on all sides by pale stone and shadow. A fig tree leans into the space from one corner, and in the center sits a pool, a quiet square of black water mirroring the sky. You pause. It's the first water you've seen in a while, still and dark, except for a single ripple drifting lazily from a falling leaf. The air here feels cooler, more deliberate, as if the courtyard has carved out its own weather. A small bench runs along the edge. You sit. The stone is just warm enough to remind you it remembers the day. Mainstream historical fact: Babylon's courtyards were private sanctuaries. Homes were often built inward around an open-air heart that provided light, airflow, and space to cook, rest, or think. Wealthier homes might have pools like this, part well, part mirror, part stage for nighttime reflection. You can't help but imagine the people who sat here before you. A merchant tracing numbers in the dust with a sandal, a child whispering a poem to their cat, a woman rinsing her hands after threading a loom for hours, blinking against starlight. You lean forward and peer into the water. Your reflection greets you with sleepy eyes, haloed by constellations. And in the corner, on the lowest lip of stone near the surface, a spider, tiny, still, watching. Quirky tidbit: in Mesopotamian dream interpretation texts, spiders were seen as omens of patience rewarded. One clay tablet declares that dreaming of a spider on your right side foretells gain in one's house, while one on the left means a message from the gods. You glance at your right shoulder, then smile faintly. The spider shifts, but does not flee. Across the courtyard, a narrow wooden door creaks open. You wait. A boy slips out, a servant, perhaps, or just a child with too much night left in his pockets. He carries a reed basket and walks on his toes. As he nears the pool, he stops short and stares at you. You nod. He nods back. Then he tiptoes to the fig tree and begins to pick up something. Fallen figs, it seems. Some are dropped into the basket, others are inspected and tossed aside. Without a word, he holds one out to you. It's wrinkled, warm, a little squashed on one end. You take it anyway. It tastes like molasses and dust and patience. He sits beside you, basket on his lap. You share the bench like co-conspirators in some silent midnight plot. The spider hasn't moved. "Do you know the story?" he asks. You glance sideways. "Which one?" "The woman who wove too well." You nod. "My brother says it's fake," he whispers, "that it's just a lesson to keep girls quiet." Historians still argue whether the myth of Arachne was meant to reflect fear of female autonomy, or whether it originated from an older local deity absorbed into the Olympian pantheon. Some suggest she was once a household protector, others that her story was created to humble craftsmen. The boy lowers his voice. "But my grandmother says it's real. She says you can still hear her in the thread if you listen hard enough, especially when it's quiet like now." You both listen. Wind moves through the fig tree with a sound like pages turning. The pool stirs again, leaf to ripple to silence. The boy rises and leaves the last fig on the bench for you. Then he disappears back through the little door, and you're alone again. You feel the weight of sleep beginning to settle into your limbs like slow honey.
Even your thoughts feel drowsy, softer around the edges. But you stay just a little longer. You lie back on the bench, gaze tilted toward the slice of sky visible between courtyard walls. The spider, still unmoving, remains your quiet company. Somewhere in the city a bell chimes, soft and irregular, not the kind meant to summon anyone. Maybe it's a wind bell. Maybe it's someone marking their prayers with metal and movement. You think of Arachne now not as a cautionary tale, but as a relic. Not in the sense of old bones or broken statues, but in the sense of a thread that has never been cut, a whisper tucked between layers of myth too stubborn to unravel. The fig skin sticks to your fingers. You don't wipe it off. Instead, you breathe in, then out, long, easy. In the reflection of the pool, your eyes look older somehow, or maybe wiser, or maybe you're just finally tired enough to stop questioning everything. You think of what's left behind when cities fall, when stories fray, when gods forget. Sometimes it's just a pattern etched into stone. Sometimes it's a name hidden in language. Sometimes it's a spider making quiet art in the corner of a quiet room. You let that thought hold you for a moment longer. Then, with effort, you sit up. The fig is gone. So is the spider. You don't know when they left, but it feels right. You step quietly out of the courtyard and into the street once more. Babylon sleeps around you, dream thick and silk soft. You follow no map, no plan, just the drift of your own breath. Because stories are never finished, only paused, like threads wound carefully for later use. And in this pause, you find peace.
The street curves softly, and your feet follow without hesitation, like a needle tracing familiar weave. You pass a shuttered bakery with flour still dusting the doorstep. Somewhere inside, dough is rising in the dark, quiet warmth. It smells faintly of cumin and figs. Overhead, the sky has deepened to an inky blue. A few stars blink slowly, like ancient eyes. You glance upward and realize you haven't seen the moon yet tonight. You wonder whether it's hiding or watching from behind some sliver of cloud, biding its time. Mainstream historical fact: Babylonians were avid sky watchers. Their astronomers, or umanu, meticulously recorded lunar phases and planetary movements on clay tablets, predicting eclipses with astonishing precision. For them, the sky wasn't just decoration, it was divine language, a slow conversation between earth and heaven. You continue walking until the path opens into a larger plaza. It's empty now, but you can imagine what it must look like by day. Merchants haggling over sesame, children chasing each other past oil jars, an old man carving dice from sheep bone. Tonight, though, it belongs to the cats. 3 of them. One perched on a low wall, one curled beside a lamppost, and one frozen mid-step like a shadow with eyes. They watch you with the patient indifference only cats and minor gods can manage. You nod a silent greeting. The one by the post flicks its tail, accepting your presence. There's a bench beneath a fraying awning of woven reeds. You sink onto it, limbs heavy but content. A breeze rolls through the plaza, carrying the smell of dust and warm stone. You remember something, the way your grandmother used to snap thread with her teeth, the tiny sound it made like a closing door. Quirky tidbit: in some ancient Mesopotamian spells, thread was used as a stand-in for fate itself.
Knots tied during ritual weaving were thought to bind intentions or ward off evil. In love charms, a strand of wool might be knotted 9 times, each one whispered with a wish. You picture Arachne's many legs now, tying and untying knots with mathematical elegance. Not spells, perhaps, just longing, or habit, or the quiet need to keep moving, even when there's nowhere left to go. The cats blink in unison as if signaling your cue to rise again. You do. A narrow archway leads you onward, the stone chilled where shadows settle deepest. Beyond it, the air smells of river. You hadn't realized you were so close. You hear the lapping first, then a creaking of wood, then a sleepy grunt of something large, maybe a boat tethered at the bank, shifting its weight. You follow the sound, shoes crunching against bits of reed and broken shell. The path widens again, and suddenly, there it is, the Euphrates, silent and slow, as wide as a story retold 1,000 times. It moves like thought, like memory. You approach the bank. The sand is damp, clinging to your soles. You crouch and let your hand hover just above the surface, not touching. The water glows faintly with moonlight at last. She's arrived, modest and silver, casting webs across the current. Historians still argue whether Arachne's tale was a caution, a tribute, or simply a metaphor gone rogue. Did it warn against pride? Celebrate defiance? Mourn the transformation of talent into silence? Or was it all those things at once? Your fingers break the surface. The river accepts them without complaint. To your left, an old fisherman sleeps half upright in his boat, arms crossed like a priest at rest. His net is coiled beside him, knotted and worn. You wonder if Arachne would admire his work, the loops, the joins, the way each knot remembers the fingers that made it. Another breeze brushes the water, stirring ripples into tiny crescents. You sit on the edge of the bank, knees drawn in, and close your eyes. You picture thread again, not the clean, factory-perfect stuff in spools, but raw, uneven, pulled from sheep and plants and soaked in dye. You imagine the hum of a loom, the squeak of the warp, the beat of a weaver's rhythm. You see Arachne not as a girl or a spider, but as an idea, a pulse that runs beneath the weave of every myth, every caution, every praise. She isn't gone. She's in the way we tie shoes, the way we mend socks, the way a child braids grass in the field without knowing why. She's in every whispered thread of resistance, every quiet refusal to vanish. The cats arrive again, brushing past your leg like silent escorts. They settle a few feet away, curling in on themselves like commas at the end of an unwritten sentence. The moon climbs higher. You sigh, long and low. The river moves on, slow and certain. You stay a little longer, not to wait, just to rest. The path along the riverbank narrows again, winding between clusters of reeds and crooked fig trees. Your feet follow instinctively, slower now, the soft sand muffling your steps. Every so often you catch a glint of moonlight on the water, like someone flicking silver leaf across the surface. You're not alone, but it doesn't feel crowded, just shared. The air hums with quiet, insects buzzing in the reeds, the occasional croak of a bullfrog, the faint click of pebbles shifting under your heel. You pass a small wooden bridge, worn but holding, its planks smoothed by thousands of careful crossings. Someone has tied a bit of red thread to one post. You don't know why, but it flutters gently in the breeze, and you decide not to question it. Mainstream historical fact: in ancient China, red thread symbolized fate and connection. There's an old legend about an invisible red string that ties you to your destined people, lovers, friends, even enemies. It can stretch and tangle, but it never breaks. Maybe that's true for myths, too. Maybe that's how Arachne stayed tethered, across time, across cultures, from Greek clay pots to modern bedtime stories. The fig trees give way to a patch of open ground. The soil here is pale and dry, cracked like old parchment. You kneel, brush the dirt with your fingers, and find the faint remains of a tile mosaic. Just a fragment, a petal, a line of border. Someone once cared enough to craft beauty underfoot, and now only dust remembers it. You smile. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists have found mosaics in Roman latrines. Yes, bathrooms. Some with elaborate sea monsters, others with cheeky phrases in Latin. It seems even back then, people wanted a little flair with their function. You stand again, brushing your palms against your tunic. The sky has shifted shades, deeper now, like the inside of a well. Your breath fogs just slightly. The air has cooled, but not unkindly. A soft night. You reach the edge of a grove where the trees grow close together, gnarled and old, their trunks twisted like ropes. Lanterns hang from some of the branches, unlit. One has a wasp's nest inside, long abandoned. You move quietly. Here the world feels paused, like the silence between weaving beats, the moment between thread pulled and pattern revealed. Historians still argue whether the gods in myths were ever meant to be taken literally, or if they were simply placeholders for big ideas: justice, power, fear, talent, pride. They wonder if Athena's punishment of Arachne was really about mortals stepping out of place, or about art daring to challenge authority. You sit beneath one of the trees. Its bark is warm where the sun clung to it earlier. You lean back, listening to the quiet flexing of branches, the soft tick of settling wood. A nearby vine sways and catches the moonlight, revealing the glint of a delicate spiderweb. You hadn't noticed it, but now that you've seen it, you can't unsee it. It stretches between two branches, faint and perfect, spiral upon spiral, every thread glistening like silver hair. And there, at the center, sits a spider, small, brown, still. You stare. She does not move, not yet. Maybe it's Arachne, not literally, but still, maybe. She feels old, watchful, composed. You offer her a nod, respectful, equal. She doesn't flinch. Instead, she begins to spin. It starts with the smallest movement, one leg tapping a single line, then another thread, then a loop, then another. You watch, entranced. She is building something not out of fear, not out of hunger, but out of need, out of knowledge, out of something deeper than either. It is not for the gods. It is not even for you. It's for the pattern itself, the act, the motion, the web. This, you realize, is the quiet triumph. This is the answer she gave to punishment. Not retreat, not destruction, but persistence, creation, beauty, even when unwitnessed. You lie back on the ground, arms behind your head, the earth cool and soft beneath you. Above, the branches cradle the stars. You breathe out slow and full. Somewhere nearby, a nightjar sings, then falls silent. You think of hands working a loom by lamplight, of fingers threading needles, of red threads tied to wooden posts, and of a girl who would not kneel. The spider finishes her spiral. She settles again at the center, unmoving, but not undone.
You close your eyes for just a moment, just a blink. When they open again, everything has softened. The air feels heavier now, in that comforting way that says, it's okay to stop, to be still. The grove hasn't changed, but it has deepened, like a stage lit for its quiet final act. Shadows thickening, details fading into velvet. You sit up slowly, stretch, roll your shoulders. The spider is gone now. Or maybe she's still there, and you just can't see her. Either way, the web remains, whole, unbroken, a perfect memory suspended in thread. You make your way out of the grove, step slow and deliberate. There's no rush, no sense of destination. The path dips gently downward, winding back toward the quiet sprawl of the village. Lights twinkle here and there like forgotten stars. You pass a vineyard, rows of twisted vines sleeping in the dark. A fox slips between the trellises without a sound, pausing only to glance your way before vanishing like a dropped thought. Mainstream historical fact: vineyards in ancient Greece weren't just for wine. Grape leaves were used in cooking, juice in medicine, vines in offerings. The cycle of the vine, from pruning to press, was sacred and deeply seasonal, tying people to the land like, well, thread. Quirky tidbit? Some Greek farmers swore by singing to their vines, believing it made the grapes sweeter. Ballads, lullabies, even raunchy jokes. It wasn't science, but hey, who's going to argue with a guy singing to a plant at midnight? You pass a low stone wall and pause to sit again, just for a moment. The heat of the day still lingers in the stones like it's been hoarding sun all afternoon just to offer it back now. You lean back, watching the stars flicker in their lazy, ancient loops. From somewhere nearby, you hear a lyre being tuned, those delicate, wandering notes that seem to spill without direction. Not a performance, just someone plucking sound out of silence. You wonder if Arachne ever played music. Maybe she didn't need to. Maybe her web was her melody. Thread by thread, beat by beat, she spun her songs in silk. Historians still argue whether Arachne was meant to be tragic or triumphant. Was she her tale a cautionary fable against hubris, or a quiet rebellion tucked into mythology like a secret code? Was she the warning, or the echo of resistance? You stretch your legs along the wall and glance toward the town again. The lamps have mostly gone out. The streets lie hushed, drowsy with the promise of dreams. A lone figure walks by in the distance.
a woman carrying a basket, a lantern swinging from her hand. Maybe returning from a shrine, maybe just checking her neighbor's fire. Either way, she doesn't look up. But you notice her hair is bound with a thin twist of gold thread. You smile. Another thread in the tapestry. You walk again, returning to where you started, near the edge of the olive press. The stones are cool, the press silent now, its great wheel locked in sleep. You sit, cross-legged, breathe in deep. Everything around you feels stitched together, not by gods, not by fate, but by people. Weavers, workers, listeners, quiet creators who pulled beauty out of rawness and dared to leave it behind for someone to find. And maybe Arachne didn't just survive. Maybe she changed the shape of the story entirely. Not erased, not broken, just rewritten in silk. And now, as your eyes grow heavy and your breath deepens, you think of her not as a spider, not as a girl, but as a presence, as that quiet force in every act of care, every stitch, every spiral, every slow unfurling of something made by hand. The pattern continues, even now.
Wind down begins below. You lean back, slowly, letting the stillness wrap itself around your shoulders like a familiar shawl. The stone beneath you, the branches above, the hum of night creatures, they all settle into a rhythm, a gentle lull that breathes with you. No more paths to walk tonight. The stories have spun their final thread for now. You stretch just enough to ease the tension from your limbs, then let yourself go slack. The world blurs at the edges, colors softening into shadow, sounds folding into hush. The stars blink slowly, like ancient eyes half closed. That spider, whoever she is, weaves somewhere still, beneath beams, between branches, in memory and myth, and maybe even inside your own dreams. A spiral of patience, a web of persistence, the soft whisper of thread pulled through time. Let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts drift like dust on moonlight. You are safe here. You are held. The loom waits, but not yet. Rest now, traveler. You've walked far. The pattern will be there when you wake.